So we wanted to talk about heart rate and how endurance athletes like runners or cyclists can use heart rate in their training sessions. One thing that we you guys that are runners and cyclists need to keep in mind is that oftentimes running and cycling can be monotonous. And so adding this additional level of tracking your heart rate can really take the monotony out. It gives more structure. It gives accountability. So accountability would be you've set out to do a certain training session and you feel maybe you have this thought that I'm not up for this, or I don't want to push myself here. But because the plan is there and the heart rate monitoring is there, you say, all right, I got to push myself to meet that goal of what I set for the plan, that session. So accountability, it's kind of like your partner if you're training alone, which a lot of runners and cyclists may do. Also, it helps with progression. When we see chronically over a month or 2 months that the same kind of distance, that maybe a certain ride that you've done gives you a lower heart rate, then that is an indication that you are getting more fit. Perhaps you need to do a different route. Maybe you need to increase the speed so that the heart rate doesn't go down. But all of that is information about how you have progressed, how your fitness level is improving. But so about structure, how do we use it to provide structure in a run or a cycling ride?
Probably in the beginning you would be focusing more on endurance training. So if
when you're a beginner runner or cyclist.
So if you're focusing on endurance, it would probably it would mostly be 60 to 75% of your max heart rate, and then that's more doing a slow run, getting from one point to the other, but not particularly at a same speed.
You could carry on a conversation probably with somebody that's using fat more as your fuel, that kind of thing.
And then we have the stamina where you're getting from one point to the other, but you want the pace to be the same. So that would be probably 75 to 85% of your max heart rate, and that is getting yourself ready for race. The next step would be your economy training, where it's more your 85 to 95% of your max heart rate. So that's when you are now pushing. You're able to do a certain amount of work, but economically, meaning using less energy, less oxygen. So
at the same high intensity, you're using less energy.
Efficiently, you are able to move. So that would be training at about your 85 to 95%. Now looking at speed aspect, the power aspect, where you want to push in your race, might not necessarily be a plain terrain. It could be high hills in between. So how do you exactly train your body for that? So it's important you incorporate all these 4 different ways of training. In the end, I feel we are looking at improving your timings in whichever endurance sport you are playing. With all these training, it helps in getting some work done, but more efficiently with less energy usage, faster. So that's all. I think that's
and the energy systems are different at each intensity, but fat burning gives you energy for longer, and so if you can increase the intensity and still burn fat, then you're going to become more economical and efficient as well. So that's the idea with training at different intensities, so that you can get more efficient at utilizing the energy at that intensity. So a lot of endurance athletes wonder about VO2 max, and how do we look at VO2 max? How do we improve it? Does a max heart rate correlate with VO2 max at all? How do you think about it?
A max heart rate does not necessarily mean you have a good VO2 max.
A higher max heart rate doesn't necessarily mean... Because humans are, you've probably heard, many of you have heard of the age predicted max heart rate and 220 minus your age. That gives you a ballpark figure, but one way to figure out your max heart rate is just to go all out for, you have the beep test or the Bruce protocol or one of these tests. Typically, at the end of that test, whatever your heart rate is at the end is usually your max heart rate, because you're at your capacity. But that doesn't correlate with VO2 max, which is a completely different unit and information. So we get a lot of questions from athletes and oftentimes runners and cyclists also, that my heart rate went so high, is that bad? And really the answer is that it is what it is. If your heart rate goes up high, that means it went up high, and that shows that it was a high intensity for you. But the real test for whether you're in shape, that's a different question. That's how quickly your heart rate comes down after getting high.
Yeah.
So I think that's always kind of a concern for people, as they wonder whether something's wrong with them. Their heart rate goes up to a certain... Now, if your heart rate goes up really high at a low intensity, then probably you're also not very in shape as well. But
if you have a low resting heart rate and a high VO2 max, that itself is a good indication of a good cardiovascular fitness level for that particular individual.
yeah. So for as runners and cyclists, you're using heart rate. You can use it to structure your training. You can use it for accountability. You can use it for motivation. You can use it to break up the monotony of your session. And so these are good ways and good reasons why you should use heart rate during training.